I come from a small town, and people in a small town pay a lot of attention to ritual and curses, unlike others. It's not like they see ghosts everywhere, but lots of them seriously believed in the existence of the supernatural. I was in high school when this incident happened. It's been a long time since I moved out, but whenever I meet my high school friends, the memory of this incident revisits us again and again. There lived an old couple in our town. I don't recall their first names, but everyone called them Mr. and Mrs. Clayton. They didn't have any children. Everyone in town loved them for their kind and sweet nature. They were always seen together no matter where they went. I mean, they were the kind of love story where two lovers promise to grow old together. I still remember my first high school girlfriend asking me whether I love her like Mr. Clayton loves Mrs. Clayton. Well, that's the reason why she broke up, because instead of saying yes, I replied, "What bullshit is that?" I know. It was pretty insensitive of me, but I was young back then, and I also didn't feel that kind of connection with her. I still haven't felt like that for anyone. Maybe this is why I'm still single. Anyways, let's get back to the story. So, the Claytons were having their happily ever after time until one day Mrs. Clayton died in her sleep. The town people shook in sadness, but the one who got crushed under grief was Mr. Clayton. I still remember the day we attended Mrs. Clayton's funeral. It was an open casket. Mr. Clayton didn't talk to anyone, or even notice people around him. He just sat near her coffin and kept staring at her lifeless body. Then, Mrs. Clayton was taken and buried in our local graveyard. The priest uttered his prayer, and everyone started to throw soil over her coffin. Out of nowhere, Mr. Clayton jumped into her grave and started sobbing like a child. This scene broke everyone's heart in our town, and people somehow managed to take Mr. Clayton away. After his wife's sudden demise, Mr. Clayton changed into a completely different person. He didn't talk to anyone, barely came out of the house. Every town person regularly went to his house to check on him, but with more passing time, people went on with their own lives. Until one day a weird incident happened. I was playing football in the high school team, so I had to maintain an athletic routine. My coach instructed me to go for early morning walks to increase my stamina. I started waking up early right after dawn and went for a long run. Following the dusty countryside, I ran to the high road and then came back home, taking a shortcut right beside the local cemetery. It was a Monday morning and the sun hadn't risen yet, hence there was darkness around. But it wasn't pitch black, and the pale moonlight was still showing the way. I was coming back from the highway. My heartbeat was fast and I was losing breath, so I was jogging more casually. As I took the shortcut right across the cemetery, I heard a crying voice. I thought that maybe someone was in trouble and might need my help, so I stopped and started to look around. I was searching here and there, trying to find a person in a helpless situation, when my eyes went to the cemetery. The entire graveyard was visible from the road. In that half-light, half-dark situation, I saw a figure sitting near a tombstone and weeping in a squeaky voice. As I looked closer, I saw it was a woman dressed in a white gown sitting under a tombstone facing her back to me. It took me a moment to realize she was sitting at the grave of Mrs. Clayton. And not just that, she was wearing the same exact gown that Mrs. Clayton's body was dressed in. What the hell? The woman immediately turned around, and her face wasn't like any human being. Her face was extremely white, and her lips were red and smudged, like someone mutilated her face. I've never seen anything scarier than that. She then got up and started to laugh in the most freaking way possible. Believe me when I say this, I thought my heart was going to explode in fear. My morning walk turned into a run for my life. After that day, many weird incidents started to happen in our local cemetery and the area around it. These incidents usually occurred during dawn. A rumor started to spread that Mrs. Clayton's spirit is now haunting our town. One day, our pastor was going to the church to ring the morning bell, when Mrs. Clayton's ghost jumped on him from a nearby tree. He screamed with the sudden turn of event and fainted on the ground. The townspeople told Mr. Clayton to arrange a small prayer session asking for peace for her soul. Some even told him to go to an exorcist, but he stopped interacting with anyone on this matter. I heard my neighbors telling my parents that Mr. Clayton doesn't want to do anything about it because he's happy to know Mrs. Clayton has come back from the dead. People stopped going to the cemetery after dark. A week passed by and the entire town was terrorized with these supernatural occurrences. But at that time, everyone was too scared to go and look for themselves, even our pastor. The mayor called for a community meeting and announced that they're going to take this matter to the Covenant next town and perform an exorcism. The day the exorcism was about to take place, something unexpected happened. Our coach was a strong and highly practical man. He called for an early morning practice that day. As we all gathered in the school playground, he said, "Boys, we'll go for a run to warm up. Everyone finish your lunges. We'll start in 5 minutes." It was around 4 a.m. and we were a group of 4 people, including our coach. The finals were hanging around the corner, and the coach called for a special practice session with some selected players, so we started the morning run to warm ourselves up. We were running on the empty town streets. The sun hadn't come up yet, so it was mostly dark. We came near the church road when the coach took the road that went across the cemetery. "But, Coach, we shouldn't go near the cemetery at this time," Danielle said in a fearful voice. I got worried about the events happening there. "Shut up! There's no such thing as ghosts. Come on, follow me." We had to follow Coach. My heart started to beat fast again. I knew something is going to happen any minute now. We were about to cross the cemetery just when a scream took place. Everyone stopped and looked around. Danielle shouted, "Oh my God, she's coming to get us now!" We heard running footsteps behind us, and we all turned around at once. We saw Mrs. Clayton's ghost dressed in the same white gown, rushing towards us at full speed. Everyone was so shocked and scared at the same moment that we all forgot to move. She laughed while running like a maniac. She came really close and jumped on our coach. We all gasped seeing this horrible thing, but the coach suddenly grabbed her neck and gave a huge punch on her nose. Mrs. Clayton fell on the ground bleeding to death, and a scream came out of her mouth. But this time, the scream was of a man. Her wig fell off, and the sunlight touched us right at that moment. As soon as the surrounding became clear, we discovered a sad truth. It wasn't Mrs. Clayton. Rather, it was her husband. It was he who terrorized the townspeople, dressed in his wife's gown and putting her makeup on his face. No doubt her death mentally deranged him, but every individual handles grief in their distinctive way. After staying in the hospital to recover from that injury, Mr. Clayton was sent to a mental institution for better care and treatment. Our coach was no doubt the bravest man I have ever met in my life. He not only saved Mr. Clayton from going completely mad that day, but also saved the townspeople from an unknown fear that was eating them alive.